Hi there, year one, and welcome to our maths lesson. Today we're going to be looking at positional language. So that's going to be thinking about where something is in relationship to another. For example, we might say something is above something else, something's next to something else, something's to the left of something else, something's to the right of something else. Well, you'll get the idea of that when we do the main part of the lesson. But before that, we're going to be recapping on the halves and quarters of quantities. And to do this, you're going to need your 10 bars and 1 cubes or counters, or paper clips, marbles, or anything you enjoy counting with. You'll also need a sheet of paper which can be divided equally into halves on one side and quarters on the back. And finally, a whiteboard or a piece of paper to write the answer to the starter about halves and quarters. So when you're ready, we're going to get started. But before we go too far, we're going to have a recap on exactly how you find halves and quarters using the equipment that we practiced last week. So, first question here, first example is finding half of 6. So we would find half of 6 by counting the counters into each side, each half. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the answer then is going to be how many are in one side. So that's 1, 2, 3. How many are in half of our shape? And so the answer must be 3. Now, to do a quarter, we need to turn your sheet over and use the quartering sheet, which has got 4 sections. So this time, we're going to count them into each of the 4 sections. So 1, 2, and we're going to count all the way up to 8. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, although getting a bit skittish here, 8. And now we need to look at how much is in 1 quarter of the shape, and that is 1, 2. So the answer must be 2. Okay, now we're going to move you on to having a go at these questions yourselves. Now, grown-ups, there's 2 ways you can do this. You can let the children have a go for 5 or 10 minutes, depending on how well they're doing. You'll know when they're ready to stop, because they'll start getting a bit restless. Or you can do one question at a time, pausing it. Now, I'm going to go through this in just a second. So before you start, you need to pause the video now. Okay, so we're going to have a look at answers now. So the first one is a half of 2. So we'd be using our halving sheet, and we put the counters into the 2 sides, and there'd be 1 in each. And you'd have to turn it over to do a quarter of 4. And again, there's going to be 1 cube in each quarter. A half of 6, that's going to be splitting it into 3 plus 3. So that's 6. And a quarter of 8, that's going to be 2 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. 2 cubes in each section, meaning the answer is 2. A quarter of 12, well, that's going to be 3. And a half of 16, that could take a little while, but if you do it carefully, you're going to end up with 8 cubes in each half. Half of 10, you might even know that already, that's 5. And then a quarter of 20, well, that's also 5, because if we do a quarter is a half and a half again. So a quarter of 20 would be a half of 20, which is 10, and then we go back to the previous answer, and we've got a half of 10 again, which makes 20. Now, this is something you might be teaching your grown-ups. A half of 12 is written the wrong way around. Does it matter? No, of course it doesn't. A half of 12 is going to be 6. And now we've got a quarter of 20. Well, if you're clever, you could look down to the previous sheet column and you'll find it's 5. Otherwise, you could just quarter it. Now, this next one could have taken you ages, or you could have thought you could use your 10 bars. So a quarter of 40 actually ends up being 10 plus 10 plus 10 plus 10. So you'd have a 10 bar or 10 cubes in each side. So your answer is 10. And your next one is a quarter of 28. Now, I'm sorry, but there's probably no quick way of doing that. So we'd end up with it being 7. Now, this last column has turned it round. So what you need to do is you need to put the answer in each side. So if it's a half of something makes 1, you'd put 1 in each of the halving things, and then we know it's a half of 2 equals 1. a half of 2, a half of something makes 2. You'd put 2 cubes in each side, so that would be 4 altogether. And then a quarter of something makes 8. Well, a quarter of 8, this must have taken you ages, but a quarter of 8, a quarter of something to give you 8 is actually 32. Well done if you got that. And then the last one, a half of something makes 12. And again, that will have taken a little while, but the answer is 24. Brilliant work, year 1. I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope you've really been able to impress your parents in how good you are with halves and quarters. And now we're on to the main activity of the lesson. And this time, we're going to be looking at the positional language. So in the first part of the presentation, grown-ups, you may need to pause the video each time the word appears. You might want to be able to explain what the word means using a different film, or run through the presentation once without pausing and then rerunning it, again challenging your child to answer the question. So for example, if you were being asked, if you could give an example of Peter Pan is above Snow White, if you were being asked about what's Frozen is in relationship to being above something. Right, off we go. You'll need to pause it each time the word appears. So Peter Pan is to the left of Brave. Well done. Finding Nemo is to the right of 101 Dalmatians. Up is in between, oh, this is a tricky one, you're going to have to find 2 things this time, Brave and Wreck-It Ralph. Ice Age, can you guess what word that is going to appear for Frozen? Let's see if you're right. That's right, Ice Age is under Frozen. Now can you guess what word's going to appear this time? The Little Mermaid is over. Wow, I wonder if you got that one. Above would have been just as good. The Lion King. Now back to the original format. Tarzan is below Snow White. And Cars is above 101 Dalmatians. Well done. And finally, 101 Dalmatians is next to, I think it's next to 2. So let's see what you've come up with. Cars, yep, and Finding Nemo. Well done, year 1, that was amazing. So now it's over to you and you're grown up. The game you can play goes as follows. First, you need to choose a film each. Then you need to use one of the words below to explain where it is. For example, if you were to choose Brave and your grown-up was to choose Kung Fu Panda, you'd have to say Brave is above Kung Fu Panda. And grown-ups, you need to go second, obviously, because children should always go first. And you always need to choose a film that is adjacent, which means above, below, next, left or right to the first one that is being chosen. Okay, so enjoy the game and pause the video until you're ready to move. Well, I'm sure you had great fun doing that, but there's nothing to prevent you from carrying on with this maybe later in the day. You could make your own grid using DVDs, you could use toys, you could use household objects, anything really that takes your fancy. Or perhaps you fancy a bit more exercise, in which case you can walk around the house or garden challenging your child or being challenged by your child to identify something using the language of position. And that's right, don't forget that language is words like next to, right, under, left, above, in between, over and below. Well done, year 1. I hope you enjoyed your first maths lesson, and stay tuned because there'll be another one available for you tomorrow.